Hey guys, it's Shimshin. Welcome to my channel. So today I want to present the latest changes for Crusader in the last patch, and that includes balance changes, essences, and then we'll present builds for farming, dungeons, and raids with those essences, and I will talk about optimizations, and then I'll show gameplay at the end. I also want to start out by giving Shebah a shout out. Shebah, the leader of the Bean Flickers, and she has made me another wonderful thumbnail. Isn't that awesome? Let's get into the balance changes first. So you can pause this if you want to read it in detail, but I'll just summarize it here. First, we got buffs to Remonstrant Mace and Iron Faith. And the reason I lump these together is I don't think that they're good for PvE. However, I do think that they are, they're Mao has a PvP build that uses them, and so that build will get a buff. And I'll show you at the dummy actually comparing the Remonstrant Mace to a far better alternative. Okay, next we've got a buff to Upturn Gaze, and that is those are Judgment Shoulders that Orath uses in his max DPS Crusader build. However, spoiler alert, they've been outclassed by the new shoulders. And I will be showing you, comparing those at the dummy as well. Yeah, so then we've got Ornate Verdict, which is a judgment chest. And to be honest, I don't think that this merits even testing because it breaks the core synergy of max DPS builds, which revolve around combining Akarat's Rebuke with the Torrential Refrain Offhand. And for open world farming, you could use Heart of Grandeur instead of Akarat's Rebuke. But yeah, that pairing is just such a strong synergy. It's really core to maximizing your DPS. And I'll explain it more in detail later. But anyway, I don't think that that chest is worth even considering, even after the change. Lastly, we have the most impactful, most long time coming welcome changes of all, probably for most Crusaders, that you can now use all forms of Conjuration of Light and Holy Banner while moving, whether on foot or horse, so they don't dismount you. So here I am on my horse, and now I pop Holy Banner, and I'm still riding around on my horse. And it makes it so much more convenient and also more efficient. You don't have to maybe say, okay, I got to pop banner before I mount ups, and then maybe I won't have it for the entire duration of the boss fight or whatever. Great changes. Okay, so now let's get into the essences here. Let us start with the first new essence, and actually I'll show this to you in my new farming build. So it is called Briar Cask, and let's read the detailed description. Pulsing Grasp. Fist of the Heavens now unleashes an expanding pulse, dealing lightning damage to all nearby enemies. And then passive unleashes lightning every second, dealing lightning damage that strikes up to 8 nearby burning enemies. So obviously, to maximize the benefit of this, you want to have burning enemies, which brings me to the next new essence. We have the new shoulders, the Yawning Rose. Let's read their detailed description. Trial by Fire. Judgment now calls bolts of fire to fall continuously in an area around you for 5 seconds, striking random locations once every 0.5 seconds and burning enemies for a ton of damage over 2 seconds. So let's see what these look like in combination. First of all, this is the radius of the new shoulders, and this is what it looks like. And as you see, when I am near this dummy, then there's periodic lightning strikes coming out from me to the dummy. And that's actually the passive ability for the new helmet. I can prove it by equipping a different skill instead. And doing the same thing, and now you no longer see the periodic lightning strike. So I really like this synergy here for farming in particular. And then this is what the active ability of the new helmet looks like, and I will be showing these in my farming build and showing and describing how I use them to help me farm even better than ever before on Crusader. Okay, let us go to the next essence. We've got Chest Essence Absolute Authority. Critical hit chance against enemies affected by Judgment is increased by 19%. Sounds like a good buff, but again, it breaks that core synergy I mentioned of Akarat's Rebuke plus Torrential Refrain, so not even worth testing in my opinion. Okay, now next we've got the Pants Essence Shock Trooper. Fist of Heavens also explodes when hitting a burning enemy, dealing lightning damage to nearby enemies and applying shock for 2 seconds. Cannot occur more often than once every 2 seconds to the same enemy. It's very unfortunate that this is in the pants slot. In my opinion, this would have been great if it were a main hand slot, but the pants is where you've got your draw and quarter essences. So you could use the base draw and quarter, but I wouldn't recommend it these days. And because the base duration of the base draw and quarter is 5 seconds, and we have 2 now, including Galloping Brilliance, that with a base duration of 6 seconds, and that turns out to be critical, as I'll get to later. So yeah, let's just see what it looks like just for the hell of it. Okay, Shock Trooper, and all right, so here we go. And you can see now that in addition to the lightning strikes, you have these smaller, rings of lightning around the target. And you also see this debuff that says shock, taking increased lightning damage. Now, that's vague, but the in-game descriptions are terribly inconsistent in this game. But if I recall correctly, at least one of the Necromancer essences in the lightning package states that they increase lightning damage by exactly 50%, 50. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that is the precise effect of shock. Okay, yeah, as I say, would have been great for a main hand. You can't even use them in combination with the best summons, because those are also leg slot. So if you're trying to go for a different speed buff with the Unholy Wall offhand, then that's not going to be optimal either. So what is this? Unholy Wall? Because each ally affected by Holy Banner increases the movement speed of you and your allies by 12% up to a maximum of 60%. Yeah, and summons count as allies, but yeah, with the best Crusader summons also being in the pants slot, it's just a really unfortunate slot for that essence. Okay, moving on to the next one. We've got Sanctified Scribe. Sacred Fire deals increased damage to shocked enemies. Well, okay, so we see that one method of shock is rather inconvenient. Let's check out another. So let's check out this this new offhand, Facade of Horns, and let's read the detailed description once we equip it. This is Shield Glare, so let's put it right there. For example, Shield Glare no longer blinds and now erupts with lightning, dealing lightning damage to all nearby enemies and applying shock for 3 seconds, maximum 2 charges. So this is the radius. All it does is do a little bit of burst damage and apply shock. If I'm mounted up and I tap it, it seems like it applies behind me. Okay, so in my opinion, this essence doesn't do enough to merit an essence slot and especially a skill slot. And it's also very inconvenient. I don't see myself, for example, farming and having a build that depends on my, you know, precisely timing one skill just to amplify other sources of damage. So yeah, I would rate that very poorly. There's one other source of shock, and I'll actually demonstrate this with my dungeon. One of my dungeon builds is called Flail of Verve. So let's equip. This is a Falling Sword Essence, and this is what it looks like. It's a channeled skill, and one bad thing about this is that it dismounts you. So a friend of mine, Gutsu, was basically trying to see if he could use this before the latest essences came out in order to buff the condemn damage. So let's try that at the dummy and see what it's like. Basically just tapping the skill, which, yeah, first of all, tapping a channeled skill is very awkward. You Sometimes it doesn't tap, sometimes it turns off your primary attack. So yeah, this DPS is pathetic for me at least. Not worth it. And yeah, I should have showed you the breakdown, but one thing is that the condemn damage itself does actually a very small percentage of your total DPS. It's important to trigger other things. So let me explain really the core synergy now at this point, now that I've gone over the new essences. So the core synergy here between Akarat's Rebuke and Torrential Refrain is that Akarat's Rebuke changes Condemn so that every primary attack unleashes a lightning bolt, and then so it works with every primary attack, and then Torrential Refrain, what it does is that Condemn immediately triggers all continuous damage on the target it hits, causing them to take the remaining damage instantly. So each time you hit with Condemn active, you're instantly resolving all damage over time effects on the target. So basically, it pairs extremely well with Errant Ignition because that you can reapply that dot. It actually does not work so well with the damage over time gems because they have 20-second cooldown per target. So they work well farming with the Heart of Grandeur chest, but not so well for dungeons and raids. Okay, so and I'll get into gems later, but basically now we've got a key other damage over time effect that can be reapplied. That's reapplied frequently in the new shoulders, the Yawning Rose. So that's why the new shoulders are not only awesome for area of effect damage, but also for single target. And let me now just compare some different things at the test dummy. So here we've got. Let me just start out with the Mace one. That got buffed just to compare the DPS of the two. And I'm going to do a 10-second test run here. Okay, 3.1 million DPS over 10 seconds. That's a lot better than the pathetic, thing that I showed you earlier. And here's the breakdown. So you see that almost 40% of our damage is from this flail essence that got buffed, but that's not actually so impressive because that replaces our primary attack. And in other cases, the primary attack would be doing similar amounts of damage. So let's go ahead and compare that. So we had, 3.1 million. And now let us go to our dungeon build with the new shoulders. Actually, first let's Let's go and do it with the old Judgment shoulders. Upturned gaze. Okay. So yeah, we got less DPS here. And now let us actually just go back to this build. And make sure the cooldowns are reset. Look at that difference. Isn't that insane? Just by changing that one essence, we went from like 2.4 up to 4.7 almost million DPS. That is crazy. Okay. And now one other test I want to show you guys is in Oras Mech's Ray DPS build. He suggested that as a dungeon variant you could use the new Harris of the Steppes pants. So I want to show you that Galloping Brilliance is actually better than the Harris of the Steppes. So to be fair, he just mentioned that in passing. He didn't. It wasn't not the core of his build video, but I just want to show you. At least I do a lot more DPS with Galloping Brilliance. So we're trying to get close to 4.7. Okay. Yeah, 3.9. It's a major difference. Okay, and you can test it yourself if you want to compare for yourself. But yeah, so the Galloping Brilliance is the clear DPS winner, and that's why I switched to it. I think most people should have, well, everybody should have a movement speed buff. So the Harris of the Steppes that makes people faster and gives people a movement speed buff in its wake. It's not so great when you're running with people at least that know what they're doing and have decent dungeon builds. Okay, so those are some nice tests, and I want to just mention, in case you're wondering about attack speed caps with that, I've got 4 Vithus in this build. That gives me 30%. I've got base attack speed at 12%. I've got an extra 15% from the Holy Banner Eternal Affixes. So that combined is 27%. And then the Harris of the Steppes gives me 40%, and I don't have any specialized gems that increase my attack speed. So that's a total of 97%. I'm not exceeding any caps or anything, and just so you know. So Galloping Brilliance is the clear winner. Okay, now let us just see the builds themselves, starting with the farming build. Okay, now let's look at the essences for it.
I have much to show.
And we're using the new helm and shoulders. And we were using Heart of Grandeur chest, Galloping Brilliance pants, of course. These 2 main hands for Sacred Fire, but it doesn't really matter because just so you know, when you're mounted, the Sacred Fire and Punish essences do not apply because your primary attack is replaced. Same thing when you use Remonstrant Mace. Okay, and of course we're using Torrential Refrain, and that especially boosts our single target DPS for farming. So just completely blow up any elites that you come across, even Purple Quest elites. And then the Gates of Hell just for more condemned damage. Then for sets, don't look at the sets I've got on
Another tale for the cloud.
because I'm running with the same sets as I use in my dungeon build and that Oroth uses in his max DPS raid build. So what I'd actually recommend for sets for this farming build would be either you could go with 4 Grace because there's a lot of individual sources of damage, so you get a lot of these extra procs from four-piece Grace. And you could also go with, alternatively, you could go with 4 Banquet of Eyes for extra crit chance, especially the more damage over time gems you're using. And another one that could be nice would be 4 Angment that just gives you an extra damage over time effect. And yeah, that would especially boost your single target DPS for elites and stuff. And then for the other 4 pieces, I recommend definitely 2 Vithus to extend the duration of beneficial effects. That's key. And also 2 Barons. And yeah, I'll get into this right now. The Barons, basically, one of the ways that you can really increase the damage of every hit in these builds is to increase the duration of your harmful effects, and particularly your damage over time effects, because if you get an extra tick of damage on the damage over time effects, then basically that hit just does more damage when you primary attack with the Torrential Refrain offhand when you're using Akarat's Rebuke with it. So and even with Heart of Granger, it's still good. So definitely that's why I'd use Feasting Barons. And while we're on that, I would say in addition to armor penetration, you want to have high potency for these builds as well, because that'll also extend the duration of your harmful effects. Okay, so now let's go over the dungeon build that I've theory crafted to settle on. Okay,
I have much to
so
show.
what am I using? I'm using Errant Ignition Helm and Akarat's Rebuke chest. I'm using the new shoulders, Yawning Rose, using Galloping Brilliance pants. Then I'm using, again, these 2 Sacred Fire essences, even though they don't work while you're mounted. But there's just nothing else good for those slots better. And, of course, Torrential Refrain. And then we've got the Pier of Sturban because we're not using the banner duration shoulders, which I was using with my Mace variant. So I'm using Pier of Sturban to extend the duration of banner, which often works quite well in dungeons, but not really in raids. Okay, and for set items for this, we're using 4 Vithus to get not only extended duration of beneficial effects, but also increase attack speed. The faster you attack, the faster you resolve those hits of all the damage over time effects from Condemn. And then, of course, 2 Barons for reasons I explained, and then 2 Angmets as well. It extends the duration of your burning effects. And those are your 2 most powerful ones, the Errant Ignition Helm and the new shoulders. So, yeah, it's even better now with the new shoulders. And lastly, for the raid variant, I'm actually missing this one essence here for the loyalty bonus, Resplendent Mane. Okay, so let me just go over the changes here. So, okay, no change to the helm, shoulders, chest. For the pants, you'd want light striders instead for the summons. No change to the main hands, and no change to Torrential Refrain. And then for the other offhand, you want the one I just mentioned, the Resplendent Mane to give you even more attack speed. So basically, Oroth's max DPS build just with the new shoulders. Okay, now let's go into optimizations. I just want to do a quick summary of the optimizations here because I would refer you to my Ultimate Guide to Loot Farming, actually part 2. And what it's going to tell you, it's going to give you tips on how to move faster. In particular, size is acts as an independent movement speed multiplier. So I'll very quickly go over the 2 ways to get increased size here. One is to use the right side of Brawler Paragon tree. And by the way, I would watch Mao's video too because it's coming soon that you're going to want to choose one of these legendary skills. I'll link his video on that. And then the other way to increase your size is into Warband, room management. Tap your room and choose a protector buff and make sure that you've got Shepherd's Burden Remnant that increases your size by 15%. And if you don't, or if you want a more careful walk through this, watch my farming guide. So then, yeah, it's also got Paragon options for farming in particular. It's got information on familiars, both how to make a familiar with a utility trait, which is great for, especially for farming. The salvager trait is great for farming, and the armory change trait is great for certain PvE content. For example, challenge rifts. If you want to, start with a farming build and then swap in the challenge rift at the boss to a raid build, for example, that a armory utility pet would be great for that as well. The guide also goes into the optimal familiar to use as your companion to maximize your DPS. Okay, so I'd refer you to that guide. And then as far as magic attributes, mostly the same, but I'll mention some that are particularly good with this build. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about the offensive slots, the head, shoulders, and main hands and offhands. So in those slots, you can roll offensive attributes, and the best ones, general ones, are crit chance followed by crit damage. But for this particular build, another super strong one is this Holy Banner that increases the attack speed of everybody in there. I'm guessing also applies to summons. Correct me or let me know if you know for certain. The standard attack speed as a magic attribute does not apply to summons, but it's still quite a good attribute to get after the ones I just mentioned. And then since your damage breakdown is actually, even though it's a primary attack-based build, you are doing a lot of skill damage because your primary attacks are triggering the Errant Ignition and the Yawning Rose, among other things, damage over time effects. So yeah, those you're gonna primary attack damage and skill damage are both decent after all the ones I mentioned. Okay, and now let's talk about the other magic attributes that are important. We've got beneficial effects duration that you can roll on your chest, legs, boots, and belt. And that's critical in order to maximize uptime on your horse and on your banner in particular. And you also, for that same reason, you want the cooldown reduction, which is found on your, it can roll on your necklace, gloves, and rings. So prioritize all these things I've mentioned over, combat rating if you're above the recommended, and over the primary attributes. Okay, and that'll really help you optimize things. Now the legendary gems, again, I'd refer you to my Ultimate Loot Farming Guide if you want a more careful explanation of legendary gems. But brief summary, I recommend, the best general gems to get are ones that just give you a flat damage increase like Berserker's Eye or Blood-Soaked Jade. And then also the ones that give you flat crit chance buff like Mother's Lament and Roiling Consequence. And Then the damage over time gems, as I mentioned, are good for farming, but not so great for dungeons and raids. Uh, Now, the Gloom Cask is actually decent, but not as good as it is with some other classes that do a higher percentage of their damage as primary attack damage. Even though you're primary attacking all the time, it's good, but not must have. And then Void Spark would also be very good, especially well with farming to help spread the damage over time gems. And Blessed Pebble. That's a key to on top of the the magic attributes I mentioned. Here's another source of beneficial effects duration. And while I'm thinking about it, another one is the reforges. You want to get beneficial effects duration on all 8 slots as reforges, and you also want to get head and shoulder runes that have beneficial effects duration and or cooldown reduction. The rare ones give beneficial effects duration, and the legendary ones give cooldown reduction. But keep in mind, there's a cooldown reduction cap of 30% per skill. So what you want to do is look at your cooldown reduction on your character sheet, and then add to that the cooldown reduction that you get uh, from Essence Mastery and Awakenings. Uh, some of these will give, Essence Mastery and or Awakenings that give cooldown reduction to a particular skill, and add those up for each skill. And if you're capped on your most important skills, then actually the rare runes for Head and Shoulders are better than the legendary ones. Okay, now finally, I want to mention curse properties. I would say the Lashed is probably the best general purpose Crusader curse property because you just primary attack so much, both in PvE and in most PvP builds, I would say. Um, the other one that you get, Nettled is good if you have a shield. Conjuration of Light is not a shield, by the way, the base skill. A shield is something that absorbs a certain amount of damage and can be broken after that damage is received. So there's one on the right side of Brawler, for example. Another one if you have barrier family bonuses on your reforges. Okay, so that's a good option if you have a shield. And uh, another good option if you want to really maximize your DPS for the raid build in particular, would be Vexed for your summons, especially if you're using Echoing Shade. And I almost forgot to mention Echoing Shade is another great gem for dungeons and raids. And it's also another great gem for all these builds is the 1-star gem Misery Elixir that, again, extends your duration of your harmful effects even more so that you can, if a tick is added, each of your hits does even more damage. Not the path I usually take, but oh well. Oh, look at that. Here's an elite. Oh, look at how fast he died. Isn't that great? And with the huge radius of these shoulders, combined with the active ability of the helmet, you can get packs without having to run so far into them and clear them out. Okay, sometimes you need to do a couple laps before the spawns, are properly spaced out. But that's enough to show you that build. Well, this is a perfect dungeon to showcase this build because it requires a lot of movement. Okay, let's see how fast we can just burst this. Ooh, yeah, he's down. Well, that was probably premature to activate my horse, to be honest. Now I'm not going to have the movement speed for this section. Okay, I'm not playing my best, but you get the idea. Okay. Just wait on the slowpokes here. And let's see how fast we can get Zolthrax down. He's down.
Is this a place where demons are tormented? Birthed? Or both?
Here's Zaka. What's up, Zaka? And he's down. This is in Inferno 2, by the way. And of course, it wouldn't be a complete pit run without a bug. Well, there we go. Okay. Well, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this guide and this video. And if you did, please like and subscribe. And I'll see you next time. Take care.